And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
I am so grateful for Christian Science and all I am learning here. When I first arrived in Plainfield, I had a great many false beliefs to overcome. Over the time I've been here, I am grateful to say that I've been able to correct many of them with all that is made available at this church and with regular practitioner support. One of the big things that has still been in need of correction is how little I thought of myself. Various things contributed to it through the years, but it's enough to say that I had a difficult time imagining when I first arrived that I'd ever be able to love myself enough to make Christ Jesus' commandment to love my neighbor as myself actually be a good thing for others. This has improved while I've been a member here, but I knew there's still a ways to go. So a few days ago, while talking to a couple church members, this sudden thought came to me as though a voice said it to me. It was, your God-given identity is just as important as everyone else's. I was floored by that and took the next couple days to really think and pray about it. I know from what I am learning here that according to Christian Science, this is true. God didn't make one idea to be more important than the other. They all have their place in His creation. And this made me realize that in one way or the other, I've been malpracticing on myself for quite some time. Perhaps long ago it was someone else's false conception of me, but I've been repeating it to myself for far too long to place blame anywhere but on me. And now that this has been made clear, I cannot continue to hold that erroneous conception of myself. And honestly, having it put that way, that my God-given identity is just as important as everyone else's, well, that has given me a lot of joy this week. And not just for me, but for all of us. God loves and values all of us equally. What a blessing. I'm so grateful for how this science constantly serves to uplift and make me ready to hear those wonderful angel thoughts that God is always sending to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Luann from New York. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for Christian Science and the prayerful work and support of my practitioner that has taught me that whenever I have challenges to face, I don't have to throw up my hands powerlessly fearing that there is no hope or that I am facing them alone. I know that God is ever present, and if I am still and let Him guide me, those challenges can and will be overcome. Last night as I was standing out on my balcony looking up at the stars, I felt a wonderful sense of peace that comes from trusting God's plan and purpose. All the stars reminded me of what my practitioner had told me once before. She said that there was a league of angels watching over me. I think about that often when I am sitting quietly in the dark. Whatever fearful thoughts I may have just disappear. Everything that Christian Science has given me over the past few years has been a blessing. I sometimes wonder where I would be right now without it. My everyday living was full of unmet challenges, which filled me with discouragement because I did not know God's power and presence. I am so grateful to God for all the lessons I have been taught and for all the truths shared that have brought about the healing of a very fearful and unproductive way of living. I'm so grateful to be a member of this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam from Virginia, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to express my gratitude for wonderful changes and improvements that have come about within myself and my family home life. Since I've joined the Plainfield Church and have been studying and working and praying the way we're taught through the Bible studies, the roundtable discussions, informative articles provided on the website, and the steadfast practitioners, Changes have really come about in my life and the family. We are taught the pure Christian Science doctrine Mary Baker Eddy provided in her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, the healing truth, the comforter, which she in turn gave as a loving gift to all mankind for all eternity. I have found that with the work and prayer I have been faithfully engaged in, various types of enjoyment I used to like have dropped away, such as a bit too much shopping. I rarely shop now, and when I do, it is for a very short time. It just does not hold any entertainment for me at all. It now looks like a lot of matter that I do not need. Also, spending time watching certain television programs. I very seldom watch television anymore, and if so, it is usually the educational programs that our family enjoy watching. I also used to love reading books, not anymore for the most part. I find myself a bit restless and wanting to spend time with God and learning more about my true home, the spiritual creation. It has all changed. I had heard that when you start working and praying this way, that the material picture does not hold your interest and that you develop a higher standard and quality of living. My husband has become faithful in his prayer and study, so much so that he suspended our television service and has remarked that it does not hold much interest for him anymore, since he too has become an earnest student. These are some of the noticeable changes. We also have become a lot more alert to the cunning way of animal magnetism. I am so grateful to God for helping me find this church and for all the wonderful blessings that have come to each member of the family and how it has started to change each one of us for the better. What a gift from God. Thank you, Plainfield, for all that you do and are doing to help mankind. I am very grateful to be here this evening, and thank you, Gary, for the powerful readings. Thank you for the healing testimonies that we will hear tonight and the lovely music. Thank you for it all. Good evening.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you. About 5 months ago, my husband and I reconnected with Plainfield Church. And at that time, we decided to contribute regularly to church. We didn't know how we were going to be able to do this, as we are both retired and on a fixed income with a strict budget. But we trusted, and I knew that if God could provide money in the fish's mouth, he could provide us with funds to give to church. Well, the first instance of supply came in March, when we started receiving our daily newspaper free, delivered in the driveway. We hadn't subscribed to it, but had been going to the neighborhood 7-Eleven each day to purchase it. The free delivery continues to this day and amounts to over $450 in savings. The next incident of God's supply came when my neighbor asked me if I knew a reputable vendor for blinds. So I gave her the name of the salesperson who installed ours. A few weeks later, this salesperson sent me a gift card of $50 as a thank you for the referral. During the summer, our community clubhouse has weekly free drawings for those who have dinner there. It's a way of drawing in business during the slow summer season. Last month, my name was drawn, and I won a $200 gift certificate. And then this month, my husband's name was drawn, and he received a $50 gift certificate. In addition to all this, we've had other instances of God's unexpected supply that have enabled us to give freely to church and still meet our financial obligations. But more than these financial gifts received, we are so grateful for the spiritual riches we are receiving from membership in this church. Every day we are learning to trust God more and are being blessed by it. I'm grateful for the practitioner help that we are both receiving here and for Mrs. Eddy's discovery of Christian Science. It has taught me that God does meet every need. And Gary, those readings were beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Shahidat from Maryland, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you so much for those readings. I was sitting on the tarmac of the National Airport here in Washington, D.C. about a week ago, having just boarded a plane for a quick overnight business trip to Milwaukee, when it suddenly hit me like a punch to the gut that I might have forgotten to turn the stove off that morning. I frantically pulled out my cell phone and texted several folks I hoped might be home at 11 a.m. on a Monday morning, including my next-door neighbor. A few minutes later, and nobody had responded, passengers were requested to put away all electronics, and I was no longer able to send or receive any messages until we landed in Milwaukee about 2 hours later. I turned off my phone as requested and promptly began to panic and berate myself for being so careless. While the prospect of my house catching fire and the ensuing property loss was indeed upsetting, the thought of harm coming to my little dog locked in the house by himself was making me physically ill. I tried to pray but could not concentrate. Then I tried to comfort myself by reading Science and Health that I had on my e-reader device, but that wasn't working either. An article by Adam Dickey called God's Law of Adjustment did come to thought. In that article, Mr. Dickey basically explains that there is no situation or condition that a person can find himself in where God cannot help. He uses the example of a seemingly helpless situation where a person is drowning in the middle of the ocean with apparently no human help at hand, and explains that even in that dire situation, there is a law of God which, when rightly appealed to, would bring about rescue. I applied that line of thinking to my situation and rationalized that if I were in the ocean drowning, the last thing I would try to do would be to read, but would instead do my best to quiet the fears and reach out to God. And so I resolved to do just that. I put the e-reader aside and just opened my heart to God and really listened for direction. Almost immediately, 2 ideas came to me. The first was God good, followed by bits and pieces from Hymn 350. I could only fully recall the first line, through the love of God our Savior, all will be well, and that was it. So I hung on to those 2 thoughts for the next hour and 45 minutes or so of the trip. I mentally declared that it was not my job to outline just how all will be well. My job was simply to hold to the fact that God good governs, therefore all will be well. For the next hour and a half of the 2-hour flight, I fought to hold on to that thought and refused to entertain any of the negative suggestions that repeatedly clamored for my attention. Once we touched down in Milwaukee and I turned the Wi-Fi on my phone back on, my neighbor had indeed responded to my emergency text. And in her text, she confirmed that, yes, I had left the stove on. She turned it off, put some water in the burnt pot, opened a few windows, and closed the door. The dog was okay, and all is well. Turns out, while I had turned the knob at the back of the front door to lock it when I had left, I had not pulled the door all the way shut. So she was able to simply push it open when she got the text, where she found the house filled with smoke, the dog barking frankly. Just as Mr. Dickey says in his article, it's not necessary to know exactly what the law of God is, what law of God is going to operate on our behalf, but just to know that God's law will take possession of and govern the whole situation. My neighbor is a Christian woman, and in discussing the incident later, we both agreed that only God could have worked this situation out such that the sudden remembrance of the lit stove happened just before the plane took off, when I was still able to send texts, and that the door happened to not lock correctly, so she was able to enter. I am so thankful to God and to have Christian Science in my life. I am also grateful for the trove of articles available to us with lots of inspired ideas on how to better practice this wonderful science. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
When I first came to Plainfield, it was to work with a practitioner concerning help with a move I was going through. I didn't realize that there was much more than this in store for me. Plainfield opened up Bible studies, roundtable discussions, and daily lessons to study. This has taught me so much more of what Christian Science is about and its true understanding. I'm so grateful for all that I'm learning here and for the support of my patient, loving practitioner. Thanks so much for tonight's reading and music, and I'm so grateful to be here this evening.
Thank you. David from Florida. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm grateful to be a member of this church. It's a church that proves that Christian Science does, in fact, heal anything and everything. Over the years, my family has had many wonderful healings, which include cancer, broken bones, colds, many things, as well as financial issues, business problems, you name it, and it has been proved to us time and time again that Christian Science does heal. There isn't anything that can't be healed or resolved by prayer when it is done right. I'm grateful that we've always had practitioners to turn to here who do heal, who work with us, and show us how to pray the right way. I'm grateful to be here tonight, to be working with a healing practitioner, and thank you very much for those readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Benjamin.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here tonight. I remember about 14 years ago, it was around this time when I moved to Plainfield from Africa. And during that early period of my time here, I remember one evening I was speaking with Mrs. Evans, who was instrumental in bringing me here. She sensed my worry about what I'm doing here. And she told me something that time, because my worry was how I was gonna be able to survive, met my needs, or go left or right, which I didn't have any idea. She told me that time that God brought me here and He would take care of me. And that simple truth that she gave to me was all I needed to know that time. And I took it to my heart and I live with it every day. Every time I will remind myself that. And that simple truth carried me to this day. 10 months ago, when my son was born, and I wasn't there because my wife was still living in the Philippines that time. And I was worried again. How am I going to be able to take care of him or them over there, and I'm here? And it kept me awake for a little while. Then that truth came back again that was given to me years ago, that God brought them here, especially my son. It was God that brought him here, and He would take care of him. And every day, as I think about my son, my wife, I think about the truth, and it keeps me going. It keeps us going. My son, his delivery was perfect delivery, and there was no problem at all throughout the 6 months he lived in the Philippines. I never get it as a news, not even a single day, except minor things that every child had to go through as they develop. And when it was time to bring them over here, God took care of it. In fact, God took care of it in the most amazing way that I didn't have to do almost nothing about it. God took care of every single step. And God brought them here. And him in particular, my son, when the war came back again, changing environment, weather, he was only a few days less than 6 months old. I started to try to worry again, and the truth came back telling me, I brought him here. And the fear went away. It's been about 4 months now since they moved over. There have never been a single day when my son was sick, not even a headache. It's not because of my own doing, but because of the truth that comes out from this church, the love of members from this church. Everybody loved them from the first time they got sight on them. The love of God that reflects from everyone. The truth that's being taught here. Every day he's growing in the strength of God. When I look at him, I can't do nothing but thank God for what he's doing in my life, what he's doing for him, for them. I'm so grateful that God brought me here. I'm more grateful for what was given to me from the very day that I came here until this day. I'm so grateful to God, to all the members here for their love and support. I cannot thank everybody enough. And I'm so grateful for Christian Science, for Mrs. Sadie. I'm so happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight. Tonight I want to express my gratitude to be learning about a higher purpose and being useful for God by living in obedience to His precepts. This teachings in this church have blessed me day to day in my life in so many ways. One of the things that I was healed of during the first couple of years I was here was reoccurring nightmares that I had since childhood. Sometimes they could be very tormenting. With regular practitioner support, learning how to pray correctly, turning my life over to God, I am sure that these disturbed nights were a result of not knowing how to handle fear and not knowing how to focus on God and face problems and address upsetting situations. But since participating here, I have found in my life a new stability, a growing sense of gratitude and joy and strength and courage and trust in God that I found nowhere else in any of the different things that I tried, and also having been a past Christian Scientist in the Boston teachings, nothing like this. I'm very grateful the gift that this church offers, the correct teachings, and the purpose of serving and glorifying God in all that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, so much for those inspiring hymns as well as the readings and particular citations that you gave. Thank you. I have learned over the years that allowing myself to keep looking back or far ahead is evil's way of keeping me troubled because of the past and fearful because of the uncertainty of the future. The summons from Job 22 says, "Acquaint now thyself with him and be at peace." And I'm so grateful that from Science and Health is teachings about what the Bible stories mean, giving us so much deeper understanding of what the Bible's message is and how it also teaches us how to apply the truth that we are learning to our everyday life. If we do this, I have found that each day, just for the day, to ask God for His direction and truly mean that I want only what He wants me to do that day. And it's so beautiful that we have learned. There's so much on our website, in the books we have, that helps us with truth, abundant truth, to keep in our thought, to keep a hymn, a psalm in our hearts, that no matter what else is going on, we can do this just to glorify God, just to honor Him. And I found that if I do that, I am guided, guarded, governed harmoniously. To really enjoy the peace that only God can give, I have learned to keep my thought acquainted with Him. Think of now, right now, what's going on so that I don't forget the good that's going on all the time and which evil would like you to forget and rather stay fearful looking at the future. Keeping our thoughts acquainted with Him, it helps us to feel the powerful presence of His care. I'm so grateful for the true living of Christian Science, that when you come here and you're really committed, you can get to understand it, what Mrs. Eddy wanted to help the whole of mankind. So grateful for all the testimonies, again, the readings, because this nowness is just too important. Thank you again. And I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Hello, everyone. Tonight I have several things to read, which I'm grateful for. The first from California. My heart rejoices with harmony and joy. I am learning the true meaning of happiness and peace. I remember a time when I spoke with a practitioner of this church. I had just started studying Christian Science, and I was disappointed because I was having a hard time staying focused and doing my Christian Science work. The practitioner recommended the article called Frozen River from the church's website. And now I can joyfully say that this frozen river is melting away. I am staying focused most of the time, and when I am not, I am divinely guided back. I don't get disappointed anymore. I understand and know that God, mind, is in control of my life. I understand how important it is to commit my every thought to God as soon as I wake up and to continue doing my Christian Science work. I am barely learning, and I am already seeing wonderful changes and miracles in my life. I thank God for this, for the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, for the practitioner support. Thank you for all your testimonies. I always learn so much from all of you. And then this one, I believe it's from Pennsylvania. God always leads me to hear what I need to hear. I am so grateful for the things Plainfield puts on its website. I was led to listen to a testimony meeting from several weeks ago. I don't remember who it was, but someone gave a testimony about being healed after Mrs. Evans had quoted a verse from Psalms. The king's daughter is all glorious within. I love it when testimonies also include healing truths. I live on a semi-rural property, and there are deer, mostly does and fawns in the summer. The oldest doe is Jane. Pardon my sense of humor. She is Jane Doe. Over the years, I have put out duck chow for the Canada geese, and Jane has developed quite a taste for them. This year, I did not see Jane until right before listening to this testimony. Her head was down and her ears were down. She was behaving weirdly, and she was skin and bones. Her rib cage was very evident through her fur, and she did not wish to eat, only a nibble here and there. Then I heard that testimony and felt the inspiration behind the words. I reasoned that although Jane wasn't human, she was an idea of God, and she too had to be all glorious within. I held to that truth every time I saw her. Her head is now up, and her ears are up. She is chowing down with vigor, and her ribs are very visible. God loves all his creation. Thank you to all of you who give testimonies. You may never know how much good you are doing and how much healing is inspired by what you say. And then this was on our website, a testimony from Virginia. While cruising north in the Atlantic Ocean with my husband and another couple, we began to hear storm warnings on the marine radio and see black clouds coming toward us from the west. We were totally alone with no other boat or land in sight, but I knew that God is always with us. Mrs. Eddy has stated, and we have studied at our Plainfield church, that the weather is under divine control, and we have nothing to fear. As I said, short prayers of knowing that God was in charge and nothing else. We gathered in the pilot house and watched and listened to the storm pass overhead, with no damage done, and it passed so quickly, too. I am forever grateful for the dominion over weather that we have been taught. And then this last one, this is an email someone sent from Kansas City. He had called the church yesterday, and I will read in part what he said, not entirely, but some of it. Dear friends of the Plainfield Church, he gives his name, and then he says, I love Christian Science. I gloriously discovered, quote, the life that is truth and the truth that is life, end quote, just over 6 years ago, when I stumbled upon a Christian Science reading room while I was out for a walk. Years before, my religious affiliation was with the Pentecostal church, where I was a traveling minister and preacher. Being a Pentecostal was a wonderful experience, but the more I read the Bible, I noticed that the spiritual interpretation, rather than the literal letter, began to inspire my thought, and this new awareness eventually led me out of the harsh fundamentalist organization that I grew up with. I purchased a copy of Science and Health and began reading every evening, studying and praying with the Bible. Within 6 months, my thought was completely transformed, and I was healed of allergies, migraines, and sleeping problems, issues that had been a part of my experience for decades. Naturally, I wanted to learn everything I could, so I began studying at the reading room several times per week and attending church meetings at a local branch church. During this time, I lived in St. Louis, so there were hundreds of Christian Scientists in the area who had heard of my progress and were anxious to meet me. I loved Christian Science and was met by the members with a warm enthusiasm and appreciation. But as the months rolled on and the honeymoon period began to end, I started seeing problems in the church. At first, I chalked it up to nothing more than the typical ecclesiastical arrogance that typically emanates from academic institutions like Principia, so I didn't think about it much. But then I noticed how the Wednesday meetings, testimony meetings, lacked the luster of true demonstration, and instead were mere engagements where people had just rambled about rather meaningless things. Individuals would stand up and talk about how Christian Science helped them win a cross-country trophy, how they were concerned about stuff they saw on the news that week, or how terrible things were in the political world, and then who they voted for. Needless to say, these were anecdotes, not testimonies. One time a woman even stood up and testified about Buddha. Then he goes on for a bit about how taking class, how he had been encouraged to, but for some reason he just couldn't. And he began to just study kind of quietly. He says, since then, my metaphysical work has been quiet, isolated, and calm. I have not associated much with the mainstream Christian Science community, but have recently been hired as a musician in a branch that I respect and whose people understand my concerns and agree with many of them. More and more, though, Christian Scientists are using medicine, embracing alternative lifestyles, and are caught up in the human version of the good life. But earlier this year, as I was praying, it was clearly impressed upon my mind that if the God-inspired metaphysical work does not get done, then Christian Science will no longer exist on the earth within 30 years. Granted, there may be remnants, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. 2 weeks ago, I got online without any real sense of direction about what I was going to search for. I randomly typed into the search engine, quote, Mrs. Eddy wept today, end quote. And lo and behold, your branch popped up, along with some resources and organizations that are dedicated to Christian Science, but independent of the organization. And so I found you, and how happy I am. I would ask you to please send me some information about your church, about your watches, etc. Whatever you think would be good for me to have, please send it. I understand you read from a different version of Science and Health in the manual. I would be happy to hear more about why. I am not trying to outline anything here. I just want to hear the untold story of who Mrs. Eddy really was and is. I know that 1910 was a pivotal year. How is it that one who could raise Calvin Fry from the dead 3 times, cure countless cancers in seconds, heal paralysis in minutes, and minister to thousands, would suddenly catch a case of pneumonia and pass away in her bed? Was there a betrayal of her, as there was with Jesus? Or having given her teaching and it not being adequately received, could it be that she simply moved on because the world was no longer worthy of her? I do not know, but what I do know is that the organization has not been forthright in honoring her place as leader and has not been honest in its handling of the Christian metaphysics. May God guide us to the impersonal yet ever-powerful consciousness of truth, life, and love as we ponder these questions with watching and prayer. My thoughts are with your congregation in the vital work you are doing. Please be in touch at any time. And then he gives this most beautiful poem from the Christian Science Journal, April 1911, excerpted from Our Leader by Benjamin Haworth Booth. "'Tis ours to watch and pray, for she has taught the accepted prayer of purified desire. The cup of healing that her hand has brought is ours forever, while her words of fire still urge us onward to the beckoning heavens and higher. Mother in Israel and our teacher still, beloved leader, wise and trusted guide. Thou hast prepared our pathway o'er the hill and shown Euphrates on the further side. and now thy pilot feet have passed that darkling tide. O gentle heart, but words are poor and weak. We will but say, we love thee. No harsh eye shall see the falling tear upon the cheek, nor the children cry. Thou art as thou hast been, our lodestar to the sky. We are so grateful to have received this beautiful email. We are so grateful for all of you out there who are finding our church and write to us. It certainly brings a freshness and an encouragement to our meetings. This person that wrote is certainly a kindred spirit, as you can tell by what he wrote. And God leads them one by one to our fold. I am so very grateful for the beautiful readings tonight, the beautiful testimonies and music. Thank God for Mrs. Eddy and Christian Science. So grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.